Thanks, Dan. That's a great presentation and something to follow. So my name is Jonathan Mathews and I work for Rolls-Royce. I've got a bit of a spoiler alert, if that's an American term, as it is in English. It's not Rolls-Royce the motor cars, it's Rolls-Royce PLC. So if you're looking for fancy car pictures and automotive-related elements, I'm sadly going to disappoint you. So, yeah. And thank you very much for turning up at this hour in the day after a long day of workshop, so that's excellent. I thought I might start with telling you a little bit about Rolls-Royce PLC. I can often make the assumption that Rolls-Royce is a well-known brand and people understand what it's about. So we are an industrial company. We make power systems for aircraft. We have a defense business and we have a power systems business. So we cover civil aircraft, we cover submarines, nuclear, civil nuclear, reciprocating engines, diesel engines, and then we have a defense business. And perhaps I shouldn't say this, but maybe our best known customer is Mr. Trump. If you look at Trump Force One, it has a couple of our engines on there. So second spoiler alert is that I'm going to focus on our aerospace business. Principally because in terms of digital, it's probably the most mature, but also I figured it was the probably of all of our businesses the best known business out there. So we have been doing digital activity for about 30 years. It's not very new to us. IoT, we were doing IoT before IoT was a term that we kind of understood. And in essence, we are ingesting data from our engines as they're flying. So that should be of some comfort to you that as soon as that engine starts up, we're starting to understand how it's performing live. So when you're taxiing across the airport, when you're at the end of the runway, when you're starting to take off, when you're starting to climb, when you're in cruise and descent, we are monitoring that engine to make sure that it's performing as it should be performing. So there's some stats on there for those of us who like loads of stats. Perhaps the bottom paragraph is the best one to look at here. We're ingesting around 5 million data points or parameters per day, about 384 auto observations, and an SLA of less than 1 hour. So there's a lot of data coming into our organization, which is now driving activity. And we're monitoring around 6,000 to 8,000 commercial flights per day. So I work for a part of Rolls-Royce called R² Data Labs. We are the analytical element of Rolls-Royce, and our job is to provide analytical capability into the organization. And we have a number of core offerings within our small unit. We're only about 270 people, so we're not a massive amount of people out of 55,000. It's quite a small niche team. But we have data management services, we have data architects, we carry out industrial AI and advanced analytics, DevOps. My role actually is to run the ecosystem. And so we are now looking outside our organization, trying to join our data with the vast ecosystem that exists out there. And that's principally driven by the fact that we know not all the best people work for Rolls-Royce, and there's huge talent out there, and we want to tap into that talent. And that's a really important point, I think, around the whole essence of this part of the presentation. So we're also responsible for disruptive change in the organization. So that's one of our core asks of our organization, of our team by the executive leadership team. And that's to support also the strategy that Rolls-Royce has, its digital strategy. And it's got 3 elements to that. First is perfecting the digital twin, making sure that design, as designed, as made, as operated, has some clarity and conformance. The second is amplifying and accelerating data innovation. So we want to try and get greater value out of that data, greater insight, and actionable insight is what we're looking for there. And then the last element is a digital-first mindset. So we've realized that we can't go down this journey of digitalization without taking people with us. And that's a really fundamental element of an organization. And that comes back to the fact that I've had a great time here at ARC, and there's a huge amount of technology, and that's awesome. But we can all go out and buy the same technology. So my competitors can go out and get the same access to the same technology. What really makes it different is that how your people in your organization embrace that technology, use that technology, create value through that technology. So our key differentiator is going to be our people at whatever state of the digital journey that we're on. So in our Square Data Labs, then, we're trying to take a whole bunch of data from design, from manufacturing, from our make facilities, operational data, and we're trying to add that to also contextual data, so other data sets that are out there that could be of use, and mash that all together and then come up with new data services and applications and actionable information. So that's going to drive the two most important elements in our organization: how our people can be, how we can help our people, but principally how our people can help our customer. And if we lose sight of those two elements, I think we've really lost the match. So, like anybody in anybody here who's works in an organization, you've got a huge range of people in that organization. So we have millennials like myself stood at the front, leading the charge, and we have people like Graham here, who's, just because he looks quite old, people think that he's not interested in the new technology and digitalization. But actually, he's got grandchildren. He's really interested. He wants to understand what's going on. So he's really curious and interested. We've got not so old people, not so young, but actually people who sit in front of tech, who interface with tech. And you can often make the mistake that actually they're digital savvy because they sit in front of a computer screen, they drive a SAP or ERP system, so it's natural they must be really cool and they can do all sorts of things. But actually, some of those feel overwhelmed and can often be deflated by the state of their understanding. Then we've got people who really want to embrace it, really want to get involved, and we've got to try and create an avenue for that to happen so that they just don't receive tech, but they're able to work and influence how that tech lands so that they have skin in the game, okay? That they buy into the change that's taking place. Because if we don't do that, then, we'll all push against it. When change happens and you're not there and you've not got skin in the game, as Dan was pointing out, you are going to push against it. It's a natural activity. Then we've got people who are at the front end with the customer and the pilots. They want to be able to speak and understand and be knowledgeable and understand what the company's doing and convey that to our ultimate customer who's in charge of the aircraft. So they want to be kept up to date. They don't have a huge amount of time. They're mobile. They want that delivered into them in a way that they can ingest quickly and then understand. And then at the far end, we have the new guys coming in and new girls coming in. Okay, the graduates who are fresh out of university, who we need to take care of as well. We need to nurture that spirit that they come with and really give them an avenue, give them a chance, respect the capability that they've got, not just say, okay, well, you've just come out of the apprenticeship scheme, once an apprentice, always an apprentice. No, you've got some knowledge, you're a graduate, you've got some capability. We want to understand that. So really what we're trying to do here, and I'm not going to use a particular word, and the particular word I'm not going to use is empower. I am going to use a different word. I'm going to use a word called emancipate. So what we're trying to do here with digitalization is emancipate our workforce, free them to embrace, and not dictate to them to embrace, but free them to embrace. So when we started to think about this, in 2017, we created what we call a digital academy. And that was there, put in place as a very small team, about 5 people, who are there now to create the wherewithal to help us go on this journey, emancipation of people, and bring them along that journey of digitalization. So here we've got kind of 3 elements that we're trying to do here. We're trying to excite and connect our people to the digital world. It's quite a difficult word to say at this time of day. Through digital talks. So we run forums after work. We invite all sorts of different companies down, sometimes a tech company like Oracle, sometimes a non-tech company like Manchester City to come along and talk to us about how they use digital technology to drive supporter involvement in a football game. So we started to provide educate and learning capability, and then we start to enable that with digital kits. And being an engineering company, then we just create a whole package of well thought out logic behind that. And we have what we call our digital elements table. And this addresses culture and mindset, skills, and enablement. And what we're trying to do here is to build this into the career frameworks that we all have, so that those people can naturally access that through their personal development plans and their reviews that they have with their line managers. So with that table of elements, we're trying to address a population which is kind of wedge-shaped. And the 2 wedges are, the number on the left of the population that we're trying to address, but also the competency level that we need that population to get to. So we establish a number of key stages in that. And we also start to talk around sort of 3 or 4 different terms. First is an ambassador. So as people come onto the program and they go through some of the digital workshops that we run, they learn how to program a Lego robot, and they have a great fun, and they learn about all sorts of basics. They become ambassadors, and they go back and they start to spread that word. They become the infectors, as we heard in the previous session. Then we have what we call pioneers. These are people who really are passionate about digitalization in their business, and we've got pioneers spread around from each of our business units. And they're the kind of go-to people to evangelate against on the programs that we're running. Then we've got practitioners, people who we need to have at an expert level in capability. And then supporting those, we've got what we call specialist guilds. And these are communities of practice, but they're at the far end. We have, in those, we'll have our fellows, our company fellows, who are really the subject matter experts and there to be at the cutting edge of that tech and that journey. We then put a whole bunch of things in there so that you can go and physically access that on the internet and download that. But also we take care of how people want to learn, okay? And we learned in the previous workshop, actually, that our learning styles are all different, and that our access and the time to access is all different. So we make it self-service, anytime, anywhere, bite-size. Okay, so that you can do it at your leisure, when it suits you, when you're in the mood, on a platform that you can access anywhere. And that starts then to help us make this accessible to our people. So that's all really interesting, but ultimately you're all here to understand how a jet engine works. This is the science bit. So if you don't know how a jet engine works, then there's 4 words on the side. It sucks, it squeezes, it bangs, and it blows. Okay? So first of all, it sucks in a load of air. So when it's about to take off, it's ingesting a squash court full of air in 1.3 seconds, or every 1.3 seconds. The fan blades, when they're turning at rate, have a force on them equivalent to 90 tons, or 9 London buses hanging off the route. When it's at full pelt, the bit in the middle, high compressor blades here, they're rotating at about 12,500 RPM and generating per blade about 900 horsepower. They're about 60 odd in a jet engine. And the gas coming out the end, not only is it warm, but it's also coming out at about 1,000 miles an hour. So we have a very complicated engineering engine here, and a very interesting one to do if you're an engineer. Any people that don't like flying in the room? Could you raise your hands, please? You're all good flyers, okay. Or not quite. All right, then you might want to, I hope this works, because the tech's going to let me down there, isn't it?
Story building.
So that's a minor event. No. So I don't want to worry anybody, but that was a GE engine. No. GE and Pratt go through the same test. That's a test engine, and that's a minor event because we blow a fan blade off, and the whole purpose of that test is actually for the engine itself to contain the explosion so that you don't lose the wing. And you've also got a secondary or another couple of engines to go. So actually, the purpose of that was a little bit of theatre at this time of day. But the point there is that we actually have that all wired up to understand how that engine is performing. And we are doing data analytics and monitoring to make sure that doesn't happen when you're sat on the aircraft at 35,000 feet or 200 feet as you're leaving the ground in the airport. So that's a really important bit. But what I want to talk about now is we've talked about how we take our people with us. It's, well, what do they do then when they've learned all the stuff that I've just been talking about? How do they apply it? So I thought I'd run you through a couple of things that we do. And the first one is around some of the practitioners and what they did and how they did things. So this is a true activity, actually. So in a couple of years ago, we had an anomaly observation on the 1st of July. And then we saw the second anomaly observation on the 22nd, or the fourth rather, on the 22nd of September. So it's quite a short time frame. So what I didn't say is that the data that we collect from engines comes back to our data center in Derby Operations Center, and they're constantly monitoring the performance of those engines. So we had some anomalies coming back. They weren't safety related, by the way. But actually, the front desk communicated the potential recurrence of these anomalies and requested for hourly observations on all the engines in flight, which is a tough call, and we don't have all of the necessary capacity to deal with that. So over the weekend, a group of data scientists got together, and they developed a diagnostic network and installed that in our engine health monitoring system. And by the 28th of September, so we're only talking a few days from the 22nd, okay? So we're 6 days down to automatically observe those anomalies. So we're using principal component analysis, and we're cross-referencing 20 plus variables. So this is not humanly possible. You know, the brightest person in the world can maybe look at 6 different variables and see some connections if you're really clever, but the majority of people, and certainly people like me, can't get anywhere near that. So we are applying AI to help support our people and put our people where they need to be. On the 8th of December, that DN fires again. And the consequence of having that capability in now means that we start to protect our customers. That's you and I when we're flying, or the airline. So we see this anomaly firing. We understand where the flight is, and we're able to organize spares to be sent to the airport where that aircraft is about to land, and for maintenance then to pull the engine and fit parts. So we're using that capability now to drive service, positive disruptive service enhancement to our customers, which I think is really important. So we're doing more and better, but from the same people. So for those of you in the audience who have a private jet, and just judging by the lights really bright, so I think there must be a few of you, you might be interested in the next bit. So if you have a private jet, it's a little bit like having a car, I guess. I have no idea. There are times when you need to take it into the after-market service centre to have it serviced, have the oil changed, and the washer wipe refilled, etc. It's a bit more complicated than that. But this here we've applied change to the way that we've done this before in order to enhance the user interface and the experience of the end user, the experience of the people in our business, and ultimately the experience of the individual that owns our aircraft. So this is an application that we've developed, and we developed this with QIO, and they have helped us really put this in place and really drive transformation, I think is the word I would use at this point. Although I'm very scared to use that word as a large corporate, and sometimes I think that corporates can't transform, we can just do managed incremental change. So, aftermarket service center authorization. So one of the key things around this is that you want to know what you're authorized to change and what warranties you have bought with that aircraft, so that you want to figure out who's paying for it. The first thing is to understand, okay, you have a dashboard that comes up when you know the tail number of the aircraft. You then get a contextual data set that tells you, okay, this is what's under warranty, this is what's required for the service, etc. Then the end users can see the activity that he has to carry out, and that's really important, and you can just plan that work. We know also, coming back into us then from that data set, we're joining and pulling in a huge number of different data elements across all sorts of databases. So we're now getting some feedback and some contextual data of our own that we can do analytics on. We have key resource capability built into that application. We've got parts, insights, costs, availability, choices, etc. We've got coverage, and then also we've got a dashboard that's created to help us understand, okay, is the flow of work really as we want it to be? Are there any impedances to that flow that we need to manage effectively? And this happens at a global level. So aftermarket service centers in the business jet world tend to be third-party organizations. They're not owned by Rolls-Royce. But this happens right across the globe, and you can see that we are now taking that data, allowing that data to be used by third parties securely, up to date, sole source of the truth, and enhance our end user experience. And I think the really important point here is that this is a win for our customer, number one. It's a win for the ASC users, the aftermarket service center users, and it's a win for the people. So this is making the guy at the aftermarket service center have the information that he needs at his fingertips. So before this application was in, it could take between 1 and 14 days to get pre-authorization to change parts, etc., because we had to go through all of the contracts and the warranty and make sure that we were liable, or whether it was the owner liability. All that is done now automatically, and the focus of the team is really on the exceptions. So the important bit about this for me is that now we're trying to give our guys and girls the ability to focus on the exceptions, but actually, more importantly, do the job that we probably originally employed them to do. So when you think about it, often you come in and you've signed up for a contract, you're doing a job. How often have you come in and actually it doesn't kind of look like what you thought it was going to be, because you've got all of this other hassle in the way that gets in the way of you doing the job. So we're trying to remove that hassle. We're putting the customer at the front end of this, we're putting the user at the front end, and both the user at the aftermarket service center, but also the user at our organization as well. And that's really where QI helped us pull all of that together and bring those people in so that we get win-wins all the way around. And then we get people-centric collaboration. Awesome. This is the point of digitalization for me, is that we are trying to make life better for us as employers and for our customers. So we get common shared understood goals, we get clear accountability, we get real-time collaboration, and we get a truly high-performing culture. So the thing to think about here, our performance is equal to our potential minus our impedances. If you want to write a mathematical formula. So if you get rid of the impedances, your performance equals your potential. And if you employ really good people and develop them, hey, your performance will outstrip your competitor. So ultimately, R² Data Labs is trying to connect people and data end-to-end to maximize value. And it's not just doing clever things, but we're trying to do things cleverly. And that's an important bit. And we're trying really to put people at the center of this journey and to use that capability, that innovative capability that humans have that separates us from a vast number of animals and mammals on this planet. So thank you very much.